And we are live. Hello, and welcome to the Delicious Recipe here on UPRN. If you are watching, you can check us out on their UPRN Facebook. There's also on Twitch. There's also on YouTube. I believe we're in UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials and the UFO Paranormal radio one. Okay, and I'm just double checking here, and yes, we are. I can see us on the screen, so we are on YouTube as well. So this one here I called Xmas Feast, and we're back into this time. We got a solstice that's coming up, and we also have our favorite guest there coming back on again. That's been doing a quarterly hits with us during this, I guess, the year, and that's Varla Ventura. Hello, Varla.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me back. I
And
realize
also,
I'm very dark. It's very dark out, and I put all my lights on in this little dark room of mine. And this, I'm just not. Maybe I'll bring this candle a little closer.
You have
to
a
like.
snowstorm.
There we go. Yeah, we have. Oh, I think we're getting the same storm, you guys. We're supposed to get like 5 inches tomorrow.
Yes.
So,
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Lee. I'm on UPRN too. I'm the host of the Angel Rock and Dell's, depending on what day, better or maybe worse half, partner in crime. And Varla is our favorite guest. We tell everybody about you that we love you.
yes,
thank you. I
actually,
love you guys. I love you guys. I was actually
love you
just, as I was getting ready, I just thought this is just such a relaxing. I love talking to you guys. You always have really interesting points of view, and you just make it easy. So it's a joy to be on your show.
Aww.
It's so
So
yeah.
this even goes good there since you're in the dark with the candlelight. Yeah, we were talking there the other day when we were messaging that you were thinking about doing a dark Christmas sort of short thing or something like that.
Yeah, well, so I feel like I have like a good amount of kind of folklore collected from around the world and various kind of spooky stories. And I know I'm not like the only person that researches that kind of thing, but I was just thinking, wouldn't that be a cute little book? Like, these books of mine are just these sweetly packaged. And so what if it was like I'm going backwards here, but like a skinnier version where and then it could just zoop right into a stocking, and it would be like all about, scary stories to tell at Yuletide, that kind of
You
thing.
know what
So
I'm finding? There are a lot of people, because I follow a lot of people on Halloween on YouTube that are like Halloween aficionados, but they consider themselves goth and they call it gothmas. So I bet you'd
Gothmas.
have a real
Yeah,
market for
I'm
it.
definitely popular among the goths. That's definitely my crowd.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's such a tradition of telling ghost stories around this time of year, and so I feel like some kind of collection that would embody that, plus all the little weird things that we've talked about over the years too. I think this is our anniversary of I think we were talking last holiday season. So yeah.
Yes, it seems to be really interesting that around these solstices and equinoxes and stuff like that, that they're trying to ward away some sort of dark witch or dark ghoul or dark spirit. There always seems to be, and even happens even in Christmas time too as well. Back before the commercialization of the made up Santa Claus that happened 200 years ago, there was a lot of ritual that was involved, like with Saturnella, with Mithras and stuff like that, that all went through, and it wasn't all happy Christmas trees in your and people eating turkey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there were, I mean, we kind of have that the night before Christmas. That poem was really, I think that was in like 1900 something. I want to say 1907 or something like that. And that poem really kind of shifted the way that people thought about Santa Claus and the Santa Claus myth. It embodied certain elements, but he also took poetic license. And it's interesting because, he kind of made up some of that stuff.
And the reindeer, we were watching that. I want to give a huge shout out to Jeannie Spencer watching from the UK. If you're over on Facebook, we may not see your comments. We're seeing Jeannie's, but I want to give her a shout out. She always supports Del and I's show. So thank you, Jeannie.
Oh, yeah. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, he said it was a minister. We were watching something just before we came on, and it said that he made up all the reindeer. It was a poem for his children, but he didn't want to put out that he had written it because he was of a religious faith and there wasn't very much religion in the poem.
Oh,
Yeah, that was
interesting. I
that
didn't
was
know that. But it's so funny because last night I was talking with this woman who does a podcast called Midnight in the Mountains, and she and
Mhm.
I were talking about some various holiday myths and things, and some of it we were just kind of chatting off air. And the reindeer came up, and I actually sort of discovered a couple things because um one of the connections is actually Thor, and
Yes.
Thor riding his chariot across the
Mhm.
sky and being kind of the god of lightning and thunder and the
Or
sky.
Odin, you mean? Odin?
Actually Thor. So Odin is
Oh, okay,
like the
because they
dude
said
who looks like
Odin.
Santa, right?
Yeah, no,
Odin's
we
like
said
the main
it
dude.
said Odin, and I bet you they were wrong then because they said Odin.
Okay,
But
so I think there's a little bit of both of them. So
okay,
Odin is the big head honcho of
I
the
trust you anyways with the research you do.
well, so Odin's like the Norse god of gods, right? He's
Mhm,
kind of the main god. He's got a war, death,
mhm.
magic, and so he has a really important role in the iconography of what we think of as Santa, also what we think of as Saturn, what we think of as Zeus, long flowing gray hair, gray beard, Father Time. And the passage of time at this time of year was
Okay.
very significant because the days were so short.
Mhm.
That looming darkness really made people contemplate the passage of time. So there's an element of Odin in there, but Thor was the one who had a chariot, and his chariot was drawn
Okay.
by 8 goats.
Ooh,
So that's kind of interesting. And then
yeah.
so in kind of look, I was looking into it. It's like why reindeer? Was it just that he kind of threw that in there? But there's also some various myths that involve reindeer, including this incredible let me see, I have her name, this incredible Scottish goddess. Or sorry, Norse, let me see. Let me see her
That's why I
name.
trust you. Anyways, this was someone on YouTube, and I know the amount of research that you do, both
Oh,
Bella and I do.
well,
Varla, we trust you.
it's an easy thing to sort of mix together because
Mhm,
we're also going on myths that are retold, and there's various versions out there.
mhm,
And so someone may say that Odin's the one who rode the sleigh, but it was Thor that had this
mhm,
chariot of goats. And I just found it interesting that it was and he's Odin's son,
mhm.
but I just found it interesting that it was in particular that it was 8, and then there were the 8 reindeer. So I
Mhm.
thought, okay, so what's going on with that? So let me see if I could find this goddess name, because I was just like looking up reindeer last
Yeah,
night and
that's
trying to
kind of a jump from goats to reindeer.
right. Well, okay, so is this her? Yes. Okay, so I think this is it.
well. Didn't Odin also excuse me uh, ride on a stag that had 8 legs too as well?
Yeah, there is a myth about like an 8-legged stag, or an 8, I've seen it also as an 8-legged horse with
Mhm.
Odin, and so there again is the number 8. So I think I have this name. I'm not sure if this is the right one. Um but there is this witch, this witch of the north, and her name, so some she has a few different names, but one of the names is Bewe or Bewe Naya. And she was the goddess of the night sky, in particular, like all the stars. And one of the things, she was a winter witch. And so she was kind of the one that offerings were made to this time of year and in the winter months. And one of the things that she was responsible for was the frost that brought back the food for the reindeer. And
Okay.
so I thought, okay, well, there's a little reindeer connection there, because you think, okay, well, there's this Norse mythology and there's reindeer in this kind of, the far north. Um, and in the Arctic Circle, certainly, where, up in the northern part of Finland, where,
Yeah.
many people believe that's where Santa Claus actually lives. I mean, it's basically close to the North Pole,
He's in
especially if
Finland.
you ask a Finn, they'll tell you. um, but anyway, so I just thought that was interesting that there was this winter goddess who was also associated with kind of the melting of the snow and bringing the life back. And that was specifically tied to reindeer, which of course were a major food source and a source of, leather and fat for, of just all of the things that you would, as indigenous North Americans use deer and buffalo. Same, but with reindeer, you had that much more prevalent in the Nordic countries, especially in the far north. So I don't know if there was a reverence. I mean, there's always been a reverence for any kind of hooved animal throughout mythology, right? You have the goat-footed god, who then kind of became blamed as took on the devil once the church rolled in. So they started calling the goat god the devil, and the goat god sort of represented the wildness of nature and sort of the masculinity. So you had that kind of Pan and Panic and all of these, and you see like all of the patterns in Greek and Roman mythology. Certainly there's almost direct correlations with a lot of the gods and deities and figures. So
lots of mischief around with
lots of mischief. Yeah. Which and then you have elves, and elves were known for mischief. So there's always this kind of like these little connections, and I love hearing when someone tells me a story from a different country or something, and I kind of think, oh yeah, that reminds me of. So I think that the reindeer were probably associated in imagery with the Nordic kind of idea of this elf, this magical like Santa Claus, say in the Victorian era, and then this Clement guy who did the famous poem just threw them in there as like miniature, and then from there on out that was our association with Santa, the reindeer hoofs on the roof.
I'm wondering when you brought up about the winter witch, where the myth, well, it's kind of a myth, I guess, Jack Frost. Where did Jack Frost come from?
So I did read about this really terrifying.
No,
I mean, I don't know if this is like the personification of winter, right? But there, I was reading about this Arctic monster, this Arctic winter monster. Let's see if I can get the name. I had notes. I wrote notes down, you guys,
because you knew we were going to ask you.
I knew you. I don't know. It's funny. You actually have asked me some of these things, so I feel so prepared.
And we didn't talk ahead of time.
No, we didn't. We didn't at all. We just knew it was going to be wintry. So, and I was just kind of trying to branch out from some of the things that I know about. I know more about the Celtic and the Norse mythology. So this is actually a monster that is in parts of the Arctic, and it was thought of as a demon. And the name I saw, and I saw it in a couple places just online, was Mahaha. But when I was reading about it, I do remember reading in an old book of mythology about something very similar to this. And it's basically this like pokey, icy, demonic creature that can kind of lure you out and causes hallucinations and basically causes you to get disoriented. And then, of course, what happens? Frostbite sets in and hypothermia. And so he or it is this sort of, it's almost like a terrifying, like pokey icicle man that like ravages through the forest, and something, of course, you would want to avoid at all costs in the wintertime.
Like a frozen will-o'-the-wisp.
Yeah. Like the description of it, there was one description that was just so terrifying. And of course, as it's snowing here, I'm thinking, I don't want to run into that thing.
But I was going to say, with hypothermia, that fits right in, because, and I did not know this, you don't learn this when I was going to university for nursing, but I've heard, through the medical field, that when you're going through the stages of hypothermia, right towards the end, apparently people get very disorientated and they take their clothes off thinking they're warm. And you're talking about this monster and all this stuff, like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps again just thinking about it.
One of the really freaky things is it said it tickles you to death. One of the sources I read was like, it tickles you to death. Now, I didn't read that in the book. I read that online, but I thought, tickles you to death. Maybe there's a stage.
Frostbite comes in there when you're, because I used to work out with the ironworkers out in the freezing cold -50 and stuff like that, and that's when you know you're supposed to come back in again, is when your hands start tingling, right? because then they're getting cold. You're going to get frostbite.
Right. I do know that living in Minnesota, I do
so
know
close,
that now.
yeah.
I do know that they say if you're out walking.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, one of the moms, the fellow moms that I met, said, "Now, just so you know, if you're out walking and you start feeling tingling, you should, find a house to go in immediately." I was like, "What? I didn't know." And then, so and if you don't know, if you're not used to that,
No.
it can actually, and if you're moving, right? Like if you're moving, you're working or you're walking or you're on the go, you don't necessarily feel it right away. That's why you have to be careful with kids, right? Because they're out there playing endlessly. They'll stay out. I mean, I can't get my son in and it's 10 degrees out. And it's like, no, you have to come in. It's dangerous now.
Or minus.
So now I can use this terrifying monster
Maybe.
to get him to come in.
Well, that's the dangerous thing about the cold, right? It's like you sort of asked this question, or not you, but the question was, would you rather burn to death or freeze to death? But freezing to death is you sort of the hypothermia. You sort of become in just a different sort of almost like drunk cold in a way. You just sort of, but burning.
Burning.
Okay, we
got
a question.
Drowning. Can I pick drowning?
No, that's my biggest fear. And I'm a swimmer. I'm a lifeguard. I almost drowned when I was 5. My father thought he'd teach me how to swim, and he did it to me not once. He did it to me 3 times that day. I was right on the bottom of the lake. Like I remember the water going down my throat, and no thank you. And it's quick drowning. It is, but
I guess I was just thinking mermaids.
But
I think I think there's a similar thing there with like that, the hypothermia and that moment where you get completely disorientated and you've lost the oxygen. I think that also happens in the water, and then that's when you see mermaids. But this is interesting because when I was talking with Laura, I was last night, we were talking about that space in between the dark and the light, the space in between life and death, and that those moments, as maybe that's where these supernatural creatures actually dwell, in that space in between. And sometimes we're like open enough, we get to see it when we're conscious, and other times we only see it in dreams, and other times we only see it when we're actually in that in-between space. And
like when we awaken and just before we fall asleep. That is supposed to be one of the best times to connect with spirit, with love. We have a question for you. I was highlighting it, Del.
No, I'm trying to get these off here.
Oh, I see
you can't get them off.
So the question is she related to Jesse Ventura? Because I'm not, but I did go to the state capitol, and they have all the paintings of all of the governors. And so I went and took my picture next to the one that the painting of him, because of course I grew up watching him on wrestling. So I've not met him. If I ever meet him, I'm gonna say, everybody thinks we're related, and then we can do a selfie together.
Because Jeannie's from the UK, and she knows who Jesse Ventura is. So there you go.
Yeah.
I highlighted it, so but you know this already, right, Varla? If you see it highlighted, you know there's a question.
Yeah, that's great.
She knows that.
Yeah.
Del's just learning, because he set this all up on his own tonight and everything, because we're producing our own shows now. So
good job. Yeah, congratulations.
Okay, so other things what would you say would be other sort of scary things that would be happening around Christmas time that you've come through looking at? There must be stuff that deals with fire in the Yule log. We talked before about the Yule lads, my favorite guys.
I was going to say, do you want to talk about the Yule lads in case people don't? Because the first thing that came to mind when you said scary things is not necessarily the Yule lads themselves, but the witch who is the domain, she's the mother of these Yule lads. And so this is an Icelandic myth, or an Icelandic story about the holidays. And it kind of takes place over like the 12 days leading up to Christmas. And so there's this witch who lives in a mountain, and gosh, what is her name? It's like Gurjurg or something like that.
Yeah, they're all really creepy names there. They're all long, but they didn't
there's
have
a lot
like
of Y's and little umlauts and stuff in there. So
Yeah.
I'm not great with the Icelandic pronunciation, but that's a goal of mine actually, is to go and spend some time in Iceland and study the fairy and folklore there and learn how to pronounce things correctly.
Ooh, I'd love it.
I know.
like
Yeah, an Iceland air.
Yeah,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
That we used for the show there was the sausage smuggler, and I don't even know how to.
Oh yes. Do you have them all written down? Because I'll let you say them if you want. I have them all. So,
I don't have
you
them
have
written
this
down.
you have this witch, and she has 13 very rambunctious children who are known as the Yule lads. And what the witch is trying to do is she's roaming around during the 12 days leading up to Christmas, and she is trying to trick children into misbehaving so she could plop them into her cauldron and eat them. This is how the story goes. There's also a giant roving black cat in Iceland that roams specifically on Christmas Eve looking for errant children who are not at home in bed as they should be. So then each of these Yule lads, each one represents a different sort of mischievous characteristic, and they all come down from the mountain with the mom and sort of sneak into houses and make some mayhem. And so I have them all. So let me see.
And
where's the first one?
I think what we came up with there last year is that we sort of noticed is that they're all dealing with disturbing food.
Yes, they're either disturbing food or the livestock or something very domestic. And I kind of imagine, and when you hear all the names, people listening will probably start getting this too. Like, imagine the mom or the family is in the kitchen, and they're cooking this big Christmas feast, and they're preparing things, and it takes days. And the kids keep sneaking in and trying to, eat a cookie or lick the spoon. And so they're, get out of here. So this is the way to control your children. So you have, so the very first one, which is 12th of December. So that's coming up, right? That's when it starts. So we have Styxjaster, the sheep coat clod. And I think he was kind of responsible for messing with the sheep and also with the like sheep's milk and the cheese. You have then Gulligok, who was also Giljager, but Gulligok, preyed on cows. And then you start getting more into into town here, or into the house. So we have Stubby.
The one there with the cows, you have to figure there is, because if you scare cows, you actually sour the milk, right?
Yeah.
So that would destroy the teeth, right?
Well, and think too, like, this is a pretty scarce time of year in most places historically, the midwinter, and think of Iceland as like, pretty far north, pretty intense winters. And so it's a time of scarcity. So if things are overturned or spoiled or ruined, that could actually be the difference between life and death. So, sometimes you got to go to extreme measures and tell the children that they're going to be stolen by a witch and put in her cauldron. I mean, it's perfectly understandable. Then you have, I just love this one because
Stubby.
Yes, Stubby. Stubby. And he was the pan stealer. And I think it actually said stubby pan stealer. I'm thinking that must be a certain kind of pan. I'm not totally sure. If anybody knows, maybe they can chat us and say, if there's anyone from Iceland listening, that would be super amazing.
Yeah.
They can tell us how they can correct my pronunciation. Then we have the Purus liquor, the spoon liquor. Don't lick the spoon. My personal favorite, the potus liquor, the pot liquor. And then the Askasa liquor, the bowl liquor.
We got a lot of liquors.
Followed by the Hurdaskiller, the door slammer. Don't slam the door.
Yeah. Right? Cause the cakes to fall, right?
Oh, and I was also thinking the door slammer might have even been just for really to hammer it in and convince everyone because of a winter wind coming through, and you could say, oh, it's the door slammer. Then you had the skiergammer, and this skyr is the Icelandic yogurt. And so, of course, it's a traditional food, and it would be like cultured and on, being made on the counter, and would be something that, you're not supposed to mess with, because I've made yogurt once before, and it's like sourdough. Like, you can't get outside things in it. It's got to have its own little world of bacteria, or you can ruin it pretty easily. So don't mess with don't come along and eat all the yogurt. Mm-hmm. And then Dell's favorite, Bugna Quaker, the sausage swiper.
Stealer.
Yeah.
The most terrifying one is the Glugagagger. I probably said that incredibly wrong, but he's the window peeper. I don't like him. Yeah. And then the Gattapeffer, the door sniffer.
Why would you sniff doors?
Cookies? That's all I could think. Cookies.
Well, yeah.
He's the one probably going around and sniffing at houses through the doors to find out who's cooking what, and then sends the rest of his brothers over.
And then you have the last two are the Ketrocure, the meat. So meat would be curing on a hook, and they would steal the meat off the hook. Again, terrible, right? Because you're basically taking food from the future store. And then the last one on the 13th, which would then end up being Christmas Eve, is the Kurtasnicker, the candle beggar. I think the candle beggar caused candles to go out. And of course, you wouldn't want that, because it's very dark. It's just getting increasingly dark as these days go. And it just, we've heard the song, the 12 Days of Christmas, but there's actually a lot of lore about that time being incredibly spiritual and actually very good for high magic, including crazy things like don't go out on Christmas Eve, because if you go and take water from the well, it will turn to blood at midnight on Christmas Eve. Yeah. And you'll hear, and I actually read that from Charles Dickens, was the one who I got a lot of really interesting information, because we know the Christmas Carol, which is of course a ghost story, right? It's like one of the most famous ghost stories in the world. Yep. But he was really into the tradition of the Victorian ghost story at Christmas time. So much so that he put out a regular publication, kind of a journal, and it was called All Year Round, and he published it all year round. And he had a Christmas edition, and he would do ghost stories every year, including gathering people and having them contribute stories. One year he did this I think it was in like 1890, he did this very elaborate literary ghost stunt where he basically created a haunted house, and he wrote the introduction, and he said, okay, here's this haunted house, and here are all the rooms. And he walks into the room of this haunted house, and there's bells for each room. So you've got, the colonel's room and the servants' quarters and all that sort of thing. And then he found writers of the time that he admired or worked with, including like Wilkie Collins, who was the playwright who wrote The Woman in White, which is a play about a ghost, and was a story and then adapted as a play. Probably some people have probably read that story because it's kind of a classic ghost tale. But in any case, he got all these people and he assigned them each a room, and then they all wrote as if they were the ghosts of that room. Ooh. And pretended they stayed the night, and they were either a person staying the night or the ghost was talking to them. And there's poems in there. There's long, weird stories. There's first person dialogue. There's, it goes all over the place. So I just love that from a sort of writerly point of view also, that he had this kind of ghostly experiment. But in any case,
was Charles Dickens into the occult or into seances or anything like that?
I think he had some, probably inevitably because of the times, there was a certain amount of like spiritualism that always overlapped. I do think that he probably attended a few seances, but he wasn't like, like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and those guys who actually got more involved in the occult and sort of the Golden Dawn and things like that. I think he was really much more interested in the sort of literary aspect and the cultural aspect of what it was to tell ghost stories and why we tell ghost stories and how important that is to kind of, connect those things. It's kind of like, if you watch a scary movie with someone, there's a certain like bonding thing that happens, and I think that happens with a ghost story also. You're gripping, you're all kind of like in it together, and it creates a certain kind of communal thing. That can be said of any story, but ghost stories in particular, because they put us in a vulnerable kind of scary place. I think they really bond us in particular. So, yeah.
I know I was checking out something there earlier. Have you ever seen the alternate ending that was done by SNL for "It's a Wonderful Life"?
No.
No,
What happens?
This was, I guess, at the end there. I guess when George they find all the money and stuff like that. I guess with the SNL one, I just saw this a week ago again. This is from like about 10, 15 years ago. They go in, they find out that Potter was the guy who stole it, and then they end up beating the heck out of him. Right, that's the end of the story. Like, instead of being everybody's.
Now I'm gonna look that up. The alternate ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. One of my favorite Christmas movies.
It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, that's a good one. I love Jimmy Stewart. He's one of my favorite actors, and I love. He also was in Harvey, which is a puka story, because Harvey is this big imaginary white rabbit that he sees, and so he plays basically like this town drunk who no one believes because he's the town drunk, but he sees this rabbit. And he talks with this rabbit. And he actually says in the movie, he is a puka. And a puka is a shape-shifting fairy from Irish folklore, often appearing as a horse, but also can appear as a rabbit. And so, and like Donnie Darko is kind of like a newer version of that. Like, it's not that new anymore, but a more recent version of that kind of puka, giant, weird, menacing rabbit. But the pukas actually frequently do prey upon the town drunks. They tend to prey upon people that are a little bit bumbling as a means of trickery, and kind of, fairies don't necessarily want to be seen, or they don't necessarily, they only reveal themselves to certain people. So they can just be, playing tricks, and then they revel in the fact that this person is like, oh yeah, I got picked up by a puka last night, and that's why I ended up in a ditch, and everyone just laughs at them like, right, you're a drunk. Yeah. So that totally happens in that movie with Jimmy Stewart. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it.
I saw it. My other favorite one is Love Actually. I love that.
Oh, that's a good story. Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times. Oh,
Dell's like, oh, so
I watch it by myself. I don't ask him. Oh, hi, Shanna Gray. We got Allison Nash. I have no idea what they're saying here. It looks like some unusual. Maybe they're advertising.
I don't know.
I don't know. And Sharon,
capital letters there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they are. But welcome.
Maybe it means something, and we don't.
You're welcome to stay if you behave. Or the sausage snatcher will come.
That's right. That's right. The sausage stealer is coming for you. The door slammers is hot on your tail.
But for people that actually know, though, is like Christmas with the Santa Claus is actually a pretty recent iteration that it's actually happened here. It's more of like I think what I was looking at there is that the actual Santa Claus that was done, I think it was in before that, I think it was 1840, and that's when they merged Santa. They gave him the big red fat jolly guy and made him give out presents, and that's what all the stores that was their way of selling merchandise, right?
Right. Well, and you think about like in the US and in Canada, that was a time of like, there was another wave of immigration during that time. And so you also had blending of different cultural beliefs and rituals around this time of year. So you had people who were immigrating from Scandinavia, from Finland, from Norway, and they had a sort of like winter god or a little winter elf that they worshipped that brought in good luck for the new year. And they had candles on their trees and to bring in the light. And then you had some of the German traditions, which of course you had Krampus, the terrifying hairy beast that it's
With
funny.
the tongue?
He has a long tongue and crazy horns. And I there's a Christmas market here near me, and there's Krampus is always there. And I'm always trying to convince my son to get wouldn't that be that's just like the greatest holiday card if we could just get in there with Krampus. And he is just like, no
Over
way, nope. Not standing anywhere near that thing. And so it's doing like that's Krampus was the one that would snatch the children and punish the children who were misbehaving. And then his counterpart, of course, was Saint Nicholas, which then, we call him Saint Nick. So I think we had also around that time, we had this kind of blending of all of these different beliefs that were also around centered around the winter, because they're in the northern hemisphere. It's all around the solstice. There's different roots and rituals. In Italy, you have the witch Befana, and you know what she does? She goes from rooftop to rooftop, and she sweeps away the bad luck and brings in the good luck. And sometimes she goes down the chimney and she leaves gifts for good children. So you have a lot of these kind of things that overlap.
What about Father Christmas? Where does that come from in the UK?
Yeah, I think Father Christmas was kind of a blending of some of the Norse, like the Father Time, and then some of the ideas of benevolence during the invasion of Christianity. Sort of kind of started blending that in, and you would see him depicted in long robes that were beautiful, like blue, or you might see them in green. And there was a connection to Saturn. And I think, Del, earlier you mentioned Saturnalia, which was a holiday that was celebrated and still is celebrated around this time. That, again, Saturn has this, father time, this idea of like looking back and kind of a retrospective or an introspective, and trying to kind of find that balance. Saturn often rules kind of the darker domains, and that's absolutely this time of year. So I mean, it's really interesting, because we do think of Santa as this one thing, but really you've got the Tomty, who are these little red-capped elves, and you've got and there's just like all of these little bits that have come together. But what I love about it is that the idea of magic at Christmas, which we think is just like the spirit of giving or whatever, is packaged up in the Hallmark movie, but really it's a time of high magic. And that has pervaded over all the years, because of course it was originally a pagan holiday, right? I mean, it was a time to welcome the light that is hopefully coming, and ask for help to get through the scarcity of winter. And you'll see those rituals around the world at that mark between winter and end of winter.
Right, because we're going into longer days of night, or longer nights, right? The whole part of the winter time where the light is very short.
Yeah.
And there's been so much stuff talked about through any holiday or any solstice, stuff like that goes through, and stories about beware of the darkness. There's always something out there that's going to take you, right? You don't put little kids go into the forest where it's dark, because there's always going to be some sort of thing that's going to go and grab them and take them. But one thing I wanted to ask, though, too, you know anything about this elf on the shelf? Like,
I'm glad you asked that.
I heard this is supposed to be like an evil entity that people put into their house.
I hate that thing.
So do I.
Okay, so let me tell you, though, why it's evil. Because you commit to it and then you're stuck. And every night for 24 nights in a row, you have to come up with some clever thing the elf is doing. And I just, we didn't do it. But I think he's really cute. And I like the idea of this elf kind of like hanging out and being like the messenger. But when you read the book, I mean, it's a pretty recent product. When you read the book that comes along with it, it's pretty creepy. It's like Nest Cam kind of in your house creepy.
Yes, because
it's like he sees you when you're sleeping. Yeah, it's just like, okay.
Well, I'm a DIYer, and people are coming up with ways to make Santa cams and elf cams on ornaments. They don't film, they just look like they do.
Yeah.
And then I was we don't have Dollar Tree or anything here. We have Dollarama. And they have yearbooks for the elf, if you can believe it, like every year. And it comes up with all these ideas. There's outfits now and pets.
Oh, yeah. So let's just issue a warning. If you have young children or you're expecting children and somebody gives you an elf on the shelf, throw it away before you go down the rabbit hole, because once you start, you're committing for a good 10 years. That's 240 different things you're going to have to come up
or
with.
At our house, we have perpetual Christmas. My almost 24-year-old still, he's like a 5 to 7-year-old. So we go through same Christmas traditions every year. He believes in Santa. Hi, Joe Glover. Joe Glover's joining us from Facebook. So sorry,
what do you have to do for the elf on the shelf then? What is, you have to come up with a scenario every day that it does?
Yeah.
Move it around the house.
Yeah. So in order to convince children that the elf is real and really watching on behalf of Santa, you move it around the house and you have it kind of do different things and like different poses and stuff. And so it's become sort of like a trend where, I mean, you said you're a DIY, you probably see it all over Pinterest and stuff. It's like, oh, you do this funny thing. And then of course there's like, weird, Elf on the Shelf fails. I know a mom who accidentally burned her. She did not mean to, but it like got too close to a candle. And now but like the kids know that it's that elf. So now she's got like this, damaged elf that she has to kind of like,
couldn't
work
Santa
with.
have sent a replacement?
He's retired.
Here comes Elf on the Shelf's brother or something, or cousin come over to.
But I do think like the idea of the elves as helpers for Santa is where that came from. That the elves were the one, we know the talking about the elves being the ones that make the gifts or help deliver the gifts to the children. And I think that there is a connection there with the idea of making little offerings for these little creatures, like the tomte and the tomte are the Swedish little elves, and I think in Finland they're tontu, and then they're like nisi, but they're all like these little guys that have red caps and white beards, and sometimes people just make them out of wood or some kind of like important magical wood, and they set them on their doorsteps, and they kind of look like little gnomes.
I love
but they look basically like a teeny tiny Santa is what they look like. And,
was there anything, I guess, if you were looking to, I don't know if you did or not, any race of people that were up around, say, Germany, up in the parts of Finland and stuff like that were small people like the pygmies, that somebody would have associated them being small people or elves and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, like that's definitely possible. As someone from like maybe like European descent was traveling up there, because there are like the Laplanders in Finland are actually fairly small, and some of the indigenous Icelandic people can be quite small. Like think of Bjork, she's a tiny little thing. So I think that's definitely possible that some of those things became just like, I know we've talked about this before, but like with werewolves, we had reverends observing rituals that I did not understand. And these rituals involved donning of skins and dancing around fires and trying to transition from this world into the next and shapeshift in order to, have success in a battle or have success in a hunt, or basically strike some kind of balance within, the group. So when you had the people who were coming along writing things down, they had a certain cultural bias, which would come because they were the ones who actually they had the money and the means to be able to, learn to be educated and to the leisure time to write. And frequently it was men of the cloth who would do this. So I think that you're definitely onto something there, because there's you would observe these rituals, and then they would be interpreted through the eyes of someone who had a very specific agenda, which was to convert the pagans, right? And so you have to think about all those stories and think about what they really saw, like what they saw. You and I might go and observe and see something completely different, but we have only this sort of, filtered written record to go on. And so I think that's absolutely, that some of those ideas could blend together. And there's certain biases that come into play there about making, exaggerating what the size of a person is or isn't. There are actually these Scandinavian trolls in some stories. The Scandinavian trolls, actually, they are not like, you think of trolls and you kind of think of like these kind of gruesome, brutish creatures that hang out around water and bridges. But they're protectors, right? They're kind of like gargoyles. They're protectors. But these Scandinavian trolls are actually, the way they're described, they're almost like the Nephilim. Like they're very tall and very angelic-like. And I think I have an excerpt about one of the Scandinavian trolls in my book here. I can probably dredge up.
Yeah, I thought about this because we were, me and Laura there, we watched that American Gods TV show, which was really sort of interesting there. And Mad, I can't remember, it was Mad Mooney or whatever. He was the leprechaun in there, and he was a really tall guy
he's huge
with red hair. And he said,
Sweeney.
Matt Sweeney, yes. And the reason that he said that, the girl goes to him and says, well, I thought all leprechauns were tiny, short little people. He says, no, that's what the Catholics did to demasculate us, to make us to be, basically to shun us, right?
Right.
They said, okay, these tall people, says, we'll just make them little midgets. And we'll make fun of them like that, even though they were huge people, right? So I sort of wonder about that through history, if some of these things, like maybe there was people that were like that, but somebody, whoever was in power, says, oh, we'll just make these little tiny people, and so people think they're weak, right?
Yeah, yep. And also at the same time exaggerate the size of the hero, right? And kind of exaggerate the myths so that they seem like myths, as in don't believe them, not as in stories that actually have the origins and the truth in them. Right. So let's see if I have this. Okay, so those are the Welsh, Santa Claus. I know I have this thing about the Scandinavian trolls being beautiful, and in Scandinavia, especially Sweden, the elves are beautiful and mostly peaceful creatures called Alvheim, or sometimes Alvi, Alv, or Elbi. In Norway, elves are known as Huldrefolk. They live underground in hilly and rocky areas. And I'm looking for this thing about the trolls, though, where they describe them as these tall creatures who are absolutely, they are absolutely beautiful. Well, I know it's in here.
Okay.
Well, anyway.
We're almost coming to the end of our hour here.
It's in there. You'll have to get the book.
You have to believe it. Anyway, so let's let them know about you, Varla. There, what you got coming up, and
what's in your store?
What's in my store? So right now there's some original cards, and I have a few holiday cards that I'm putting up. I don't know if unfortunately I can't guarantee how quick they ship in about a week. So I can't guarantee if they would actually arrive by Christmas, but my mom is an amazing artist and a witch, and she's been drawing these original cards for years. And so I've been scanning those and turning those into some things. But I have mugs and little pouches and hats and all kinds of fun. A mermaid water bottle. I just put that on there recently.
Nice.
And then, so other things going on with me. Hopefully my podcast will be up by the beginning of next year.
Yay!
There's a network that it might actually be picked up on, but I don't have that as a guarantee, so I won't say anything about the name. But if people want to go to my website, And you scroll down, it's varlaventura.net, and there's a way to subscribe there. And I should be sending out a newsletter and some information about that as it pops up. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
It'll be me reading freaky stories, sometimes talking to freaky people about their freaky stories.
Yes.
But yeah.
Okie dokie. And Laura, what do you got there coming up there this week?
I have coming up on Monday, December 13th, I have Marielle Ford Clark, who you had on a little while ago. She was supposed to be on earlier, but had a unexpected emergency. So she is graciously coming back this Monday. You guys are going to love her. She's from Ireland.
Yay.
She's had a near-death experience. She has a book. What's that, Del?
It's a really interesting lady, yeah.
Super, and just so sweet. And if you ever want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. Thanks, Del, for joining me. And Varla, we love you so much.
Yes, okay. And
Thank
let's
you.
pop this off there to the next show that comes afterwards. I can hear a little ticker-tackering in the air there.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. Yeah.
And
talk to you hopefully over the holidays.
Next Thursday, and everybody else out there, happy holidays, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.